son's name, I pray. Amen.
Put your hand on the outside of the wire.
There you go. So just start where you want to, and when you're finished, if I have questions, I'll just fire them away.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan. So I was brought up in the Catholic Church, and my two most significant influencers growing up were my mother, who got me to church every Sunday or Saturday, and any a holy day of obligation. So we were regular attendees. But my grandmother, I spent a lot of time with her, my mother's mother, and she cared for my grandfather for what seemed like 20 years. He had had a stroke when I was a child, and she had to do everything for him. He could use his one arm, and she would tell me that Christ had a heavier cross to bear than her, that this was just what God was calling her to do. So it's safe to say that I learned what the resurrection story was and what it meant. So as I go into my adult life, well, let me back up. There was the the parsonage for the First Baptist Church was directly across the street from my home as a child. So we were always in fellowship with whoever lived there, whatever minister that was living there. We also lived down the street from a family that had 10 children and another that had 9, and we were all Catholic. So we were frequently invited to go to things that took place at the Baptist church until one of the parents got wind of the fact that when the visitor card was passed out and the question was asked, "Are you a Christian?" and we all asked, "What do we put here?" we were told to put no. So no more of that. But I bring it up only because then I started to realize that, there's tension, what does this all mean? And but I think that the bottom of it all is that I didn't learn relationship with God. I learned about a faith in a church, belief in a church, and I believe that obviously that there are differences from one church to another. And so when I went to go marry Scott, who is from the Baptist church, of course they wouldn't permit me to do that in the Catholic church unless we signed their little agreement to bring up our children in the Catholic church, which I knew was going to be a struggle. So I guess at that point I made the decision that I was no longer Catholic, if you will. But I didn't become Baptist either, because I also understood that meant a rebirth, however that would apply to me. So Scott and I were married, I think, 8 years, and our first child was on its way. And we had what was the routine exam through ultrasound of that child or that infant to determine that one of her, we later found out was a girl, her aortic valve was not functioning. And as a matter of fact, on the picture in the ultrasound, in that gray mass, you could see the 4 chambers of the heart. And all 3 of the working ones worked, but the aortic valve did not. So what that meant was that once she was born, she was not going to be able to survive because she had no ability to provide her body with the blood that was supposed to flow through that valve. That's way probably more technical than I need to be, but what that meant is that for 4 months we were going to have to live with the expectation that we were going to give birth to a live child and then have to say goodbye to her. Well, so then I think of course God had this all planned out. Looking back on it, I'm certain of it today. We were in close proximity to the pulpit minister from the Church of Christ there in our neighborhood. We actually other social situations had come to the same circle, and so I contemplated going there, because I felt like it was common ground between the Baptist church and what little I knew about the Church of Christ. But when we got this news, my mother traveled to me to be with me, and she and I went to the Catholic Church on this Saturday night. This was all within a week of the doctor's diagnosis. We went on a Saturday night, and I remember feeling like I was in great need. I needed something, didn't know what, but I went with her because that's her source of comfort. And I observed everybody in that congregation take their communion and then exit out the back door. And sitting there when it was all over, because I couldn't take communion, I was no longer Catholic, I remember sitting there thinking, not a single person here knew that I even existed. And so I know that God needed me to know that, because in the week to come I visited with the minister from the Church of Christ, who also came from a Catholic background, and he taught me the coined phrase, pre-digested food, if you will, meaning that in the Catholic Church they teach you what they want you to know. They try to preserve their devotion to the church. And if I guess I perceive it as the risk that I would go and learn myself from Scripture what God had to say, that I might not stick around, but already things were in the workings. And so we talked at length about this, but also because of my situation. And he invited me to church the coming Sunday. And Scott was totally in agreement, and that's what we did. We walked in the door. And if I could describe for you an adoption, that's what happened to me that morning. The elders had already been informed of our situation, had spent the morning before worship in prayer over us, and there were certain individuals in the church family that also were told of us, so that when we walked in, we weren't strangers. We were welcomed with opened arms. Far contrast from what happened to me when I went to what I thought was my roots, the Catholic Church. So it's kind of awkward too. You meet new people that you never set eyes on before, and here they know this thing that's happening to you, and all they want to do is just pray over you and to support you, to be there for you, just to be in your life, to assure you that whatever may come, that they would be there for me, us, and pray for the miracle, because essentially a miracle was needed. That's what the doctor said. So that's what we prayed for, and we became knitted into the fiber in this little church family that actually there's some members that are here that were closely connected, and I hold very closely to my heart because they were one of that little family that took us in. Can I say their name?
Sure.
Monica and Kelly Fry. I just remember Kelly took me to 1 Peter, and the words that he recited were just so comforting. But that was everybody there. We get to that time when, of course, it was planned. I should say we went periodically to see special doctors who would interpret the development of the child over the next 4 months, and we always had the expectation that the news would change. We became very, very informed about the situation. It was a condition that happened, they said at that time, 1 in 600,000 births. And what caused it, I don't know. I'm sure I'll find out when that day comes, but it didn't change. It was decided that we would have a appointed day and time when she would be born, and then they would take her off to the special hospital. And I think that this is kind of neat about how God designed the bringing children into the world. But while she was still with me, my heart beat for hers. There are these special two little ducts on her heart that, until she was there, would continue to work fine. She would continue to grow and be, as a matter of fact, when she was born, almost perfect. And so that's what happened. They also prepared us. They said, there are some options for children born like this. The percentages were not in our favor, but on faith, we sent her over to the special hospital, and then for 18 days, what you do is you go to the hospital and you sit in the waiting room for your opportunity to go see your infant or talk to doctors, or I should say too that my Scott's family from another part of Louisiana and their church, those members were also all of a sudden very involved, and we had people traveling. I think it was upwards to 2 hours to be there at that hospital and to pray with us. So anyway, for 18 days we hoped, we prayed, we watched, and she would rally, and then she would fail, and she would fail worse than she rallied, and it just got to the point where the doctor said there's really nothing we can do but this one type of surgery. We'll try it, and we'll see what happens. And they give infants a lot of drugs in order to keep their heart pumping in this 18 days, but even more so. And they said to us that when we give her the medication to perform the surgery, we have to bring her off of it very quickly afterwards, within hours. And that's the telling point. And so, long day, needless to say, that surgery. And I look back and I think that her little heart was the size of a walnut. And they were able to do what they were able to do. And they fixed it. They said that if it was meant to be, that her heart would beat on her own when she came off these drugs, if, the big if. So, it didn't work. So, of course, my new church family was there with us. They went with us. We lived on the north side of, we lived north of Lake Pontchartrain, and we were traveling into New Orleans every day. And those people were going back and forth with us to be with us, and they were, so we planned our goodbye in the Church of Christ there, that we had, did we place membership? I think it was assumed we placed membership. That's a formality. And we had a beautiful little ceremony for her. It was packed. We had people travel from the south side of the lake. It was rainy, it was cold in February, and we had people come from Texas and all over in Louisiana, and it was a witness to those people who I don't think walk with the Lord. I think that they saw, without a doubt, that He moves in our life, and that It was all because of the saints that are here on earth with us, those that were there with us. I might have to say all this again.
No.
Shocking to me too, because she would be 26 this coming February. And I think that God, he revealed himself to me and never left. So we sang "It Is Well With My Soul." My Catholic family thought we had ringers in the audience. I just thought that was so funny. Would y'all do, hire people to sound that good? So anyway, I think that the thing that's important about my story is that God said no. But he put in place the beginning of a relationship with me that made it okay. He doesn't say yes all the time. And in this day and age, it's, we look for the miracles like he performed way back, and that's what we needed. And it's easy to walk away with, I think, a lack of faith rather than a gaining of faith. And in my case, it was a rebirth or a birth. So I was baptized, I think within 2 weeks of that, of saying goodbye to her. Her name was Jessie, and the church was full. It was on Wednesday night. It was awesome. So that's kind of it.
Was there something specifically that made you want to make the decision to put Christ on at baptism? Was it a Bible study, or what was the genesis of that?
I felt it was certain that there had been a new indwelling, as is written, that I had new eyes to see. And it was about, obviously, obedience. I was overjoyed to do it. I just felt like he had maneuvered things in my life to make that happen for that point in time. We used to drive by that church as it was being built, and we didn't know anybody, we didn't know anything about it. And it turns out that it was where we were supposed to go. And he had aligned the people to be there. And we spent a lot, to answer your question, we spent a lot of time studying. The minister and his wife and Scott and I became regular. We were friends, and we were regular with our individual Bible studies. And I think it was just their intent to help find answers to the questions I had about, what I read the book, when bad things happen to good people, you get to the end of that book and it just stops. There's nothing left to it. It brought about a need to know more and to understand that as a Christian, a follower of Christ, that it's not about today and now, it's about that relationship, the here and after. And of course, what we do in this lifetime and the struggles that we endure, they're going to happen to all of us, but you have to have the desire to see beyond that. So I can't tell you exactly what we studied. I think we read the book, I think it was a book by Foster on prayer. Am I correct about that? Have you heard that before?
Yeah, he's done some stuff.
Yeah, and
it's the same Foster.
And we just spent a lot of time, into that. And of course, fellowshipping with the women in the church, that was amazing. And I don't know if it's that important, but one of the things I was concerned with is that since this child they said that she wasn't going to live, is there a responsibility to do whatever you can do to make sure that she lives, if you know what I mean? Whereas, if it seemed hopeless, could we just say no? And I didn't know. We had no idea what we were in store for. Yeah. But there was that concern, and I think I said that out loud, and there was one lady, she says, no matter what you choose, we'll be there for you. So they were, they became my family.
Well, that's an amazing story.
Really?
That's because what we're looking for is the story behind people's baptisms. We want to move beyond the water, so to speak, and I think it's going to be just a wonderful illustration of the message I'm trying to get across. I think people are not going to pay attention to what I say. I think you've explained it in a way that's very, very good. Very good.
I was having a hard time because I don't like to. My family is still predominantly Catholic. There are those who do practice, and my mother, today, as she ages and loses her memory, I don't think she understands anymore what her faith was, what it should be at this point. I just hope that when I'm that age, and I'm going through that. But I just say that because there's got to be something good in it all. And I don't want to dwell on what was not good in Catholicism. I just know that God didn't use that to bring me to Him. Maybe it was the roots of my understanding, the basis for the questions that I asked, but I think it just left me in greater need.
Well, I'm about to ask Tim to turn it off. Is there any last thoughts, last words that come to mind?
Well, I think it's safe to say that God said yes, and more than once. But, Jillian was born 11 years after all this. Not that I didn't need those, those baby boys that God gave me, they more than filled me. I was so content. And so the opportunity to have Jillian come about has, needless to say, been a great source of joy in our life. She doesn't replace her. She definitely does appreciate the story. But I feel like I'm very, very blessed.